Welcome. I'm Naomi Fada. I am so glad that you joined me here to learn more about sewing. So, predominantly on this channel, I'll be talking about alterations or slipcovers. So, I started as a tailor, pretty much, my own business back in 2007. Just out of necessity, I wanted to be at home when I had kids, and sewing was something I learned as a child, but I really wasn't sure what I would encounter, what people would ask for as I started the sewing business. So I love just sharing the everyday clothing that I've learned to alter and that I hope that you can learn to alter too. I mean, if you have sewing skills, alterations are so incredibly practical. I know we all love starting from scratch, making our own clothes from a pattern, or just having that whole new project. But I personally have fallen in love with alterations because I love thrifting. And now, as a season of a mom of three, homeschooling and working, I don't have time to make my own clothes, or I could say I don't make the time to actually sew my own clothing. But I love the ability to go into a thrift store, find something that almost fits, and then alter it. So today I'm actually working on a pair of pants for a friend from church. So I have, over the course of the last 16 years, transitioned my in person business a little bit to do more bridal and slipcovers and not as much the smaller alterations, just because my time couldn't handle the foot traffic of having this smaller alterations just at the season of life. And I did find that I really enjoy the bridal and the slipcovers, but I really like to be able to bless people that I know or that have been longtime clients by continuing to serve them, because it is an important skill and I know that many people can't sew. So even if you are someone that sews, as you learn alterations, you can make some extra money doing that and really help your family, be a blessing to other people. So it's a great opportunity for that. But today I have this pair of pants that it's just too big in the waist, which could be a common problem. And rather than going and buying new clothes, this lady, she was like, it's a good pair of pants. And she doesn't want to waste them. She doesn't want to go shopping. She happens to be on a fixed income. And altering them was a great way to just not have to waste them. And there's many different types of waistbands, different ways to alter this. I look at, there's no top stitching here, but we will have to separate out the waistband and remove the belt loop first. And I do want to say, before we go any further, if you enjoy this channel, if you want to learn more about this type of alteration or any type of alteration, I'd love if you just join me, follow along, like and subscribe. It's really helped me grow this channel. I've only been at it since about June of 2023, and I'm really enjoying the process of just sharing about these alterations. So I'm gonna grab over here, which this on this wall, it's a magnetic strip, which is really great for hanging scissors, seam rippers, and all of that. So as I always say, when you are into alterations, you really have to make friends with the seam ripper. So first off, I'm going to go ahead and just remove this belt loop, because I can't get to the seam at all until I remove this belt loop. So just going to pull that off. This. And you'll notice the belt loop is attached in the waist seam. So like anything, if you've sewn patterns at all, kind of think through the process backwards. Like you're taking it apart the opposite way, reverse of putting it together. So if you've ever sewn a pair of pants with a waistband and had to install button loops, kind of envision that process backwards. Now I'm going to dig into the waistband just a little bit here. Um, and before I get any further, I do want to measure the distance. So I always like to measure how much my alteration is. So I'm going to grab one of my 6-inch rulers, which I have many, but as usual, I've spread them out a little bit. So here's one. This is actually my least favorite one because I don't love that it's clear. You know, for some reason, I just find it much harder to read. So it's about 1 inch. And when I measure my alterations, I actually only measure half, meaning I'm not measuring like I'm taking in 2 inches because it's 1 inch on this side and 1 inch on this side. I'm just measuring 1 inch from where the fold is. That's my method. I'm sure that there are people that have others. And then in order to create the right crotch seam, you're going to have to taper that down into the crotch. So again, just think about the seam that you have in a pattern and kind of like envision that in your mind. Maybe think about how patterns are graded. You know, if you are used to seeing pant patterns that have a variety of sizes in them. So now I'm in the inside of the pants. I'm actually taking apart the waistband. And I think I just want to move the camera down a little bit so you can see better. So this is the waistband, and I've started to take it apart. The top of the waistband here. I'm going to open that up a little bit further so there's no seam here. We're going to have to create one. And just taking that apart. And the belt loop actually is still in here, and I need to take it off completely in order to get to the seams. Okay. And now this is the center back seam, which we're also going to be taking in. So here's the center crotch, and what we're going to do is taper them up. So you think of here's the back seam, and it's going to go a line like this, all the way up to get to your inch up here. So I'm going to go ahead and pin these up. I'm going to take the inch straight from the top. I need to remove the waistband a little bit more. There we go. Now I do host a course on the Udemy platform that has more about waistbands and elastic waistbands. So I'm going to link that in the show notes if you are interested in some further learning on this topic. And it's relatively inexpensive. I try to make them as affordable as possible for everyone. I want you to notice, you see this type of seam that's in here? You can tell by the way that it loops that if you're to pluck this, This is one of those seams that will just run. Just all of a sudden you have the whole thread and it will completely unravel, which is not so cool. And then, so here what I'm doing is the two pieces of the waistband also need to have an inch taken off of them so that they have to be all adjusted separately and sewn together. And then you can go ahead and put the pants back together. So I am here on my trusty Juki. I really love this machine. If you're allowed to love a sewing machine, I definitely love this one. It is my industrial machine, such a power horse. And I understand that if you're a home sewer or if you're not in business, you probably don't have an industrial machine, but the concept is the same. And I just use it because it is convenient and I hate it. I don't know how else to say it. I just love this machine. So I'm going to start way down here. This is down in the crotch. Depends on which way I put my pins and which way I want to start. But I want to make sure I have a really secure forward and backward stitch here. Because like I said, this is the stitch that would be unraveling on you. All right, so now we're ready to start. And take those pins out. So really good forward, backward. And then I'm going to taper it. Now, I know that I do this all the time, so it might be a little harder to understand, but the way that I pin it is I eyeball the center of my pin here. So I know that this is, I'm starting to like taper up to being an inch from the seam because that's what I'm doing for this pair of pants. So you just begin to taper away from the original seam. So not a jutting out from it, but just curving outward. Now, if you prefer, you could go ahead and use tailor's chalk, draw your line so that you feel much more confident and where you're stitching. Now here's where it's going to get challenging. This is all up in the pocket. There's going to be some extra stitching. So it is going to be a little bit harder on your machine if you're working on a pair of pants that has a lot of stitching there. I'm just going to do an extra forward and backward to catch everything in. And this here, this point is at the top. And that's an inch from the seam. And that was my target alteration amount. I'm going to go ahead and stitch that up. Now these are the waistband pieces and I'm going to stitch them individually. That inch. And then so the front and back waistbands are separated. You just have to remember that. Okay, so I have all of these and I'm going to have to trim them. So first I'm going to go ahead and trim this back waist seam. So here's the new line seam, and I want to make a regular amount of seam allowance. Because I have a serger, I am going to take this over to serge it in a minute. Now these are the waistband pieces, so I'm going to cut through the fold, and what I'm going to have is a new seam in the waistband. I'm going to have to flatten these pieces into each other. First, I'm going to go and serge this part of the back waist seam. So here I am with the serged line down the crotch, and the first thing that I want to do, I feel some hiccups coming on, is at the very top of the waist. We're going to bring those two pieces together of the waistband, open them flat, and stitch them together. Now you are getting in some tight corners. I think that's the hardest part of alterations, is when you're used to sewing from scratch. Typically you're putting things together in an order that you don't get in these tight spaces. But when you're altering, you're opening up and you're not like changing seams in the same order that they were made in the original garment. So it does bring a challenge, but it's totally possible and you'll learn how to do it. So there we go. So that means that when you turn it over, you have the top seam at the top of your waistband, which is fabulous. Now this is a seam at which the crotch and the waistband join. And if you remember, that's actually where the belt loop was first attached in. So we have to stick that down in between those two and position it. Like that. And line everything up. Again, you're in a really tight space. And I'm actually just going to open this up a little bit because it will make it easier to make this lay flat. Okay. So now I'm turning it over and you see here is my belt loop sticking up. And then I'm just going to stitch it down a little bit and know that then it's going to come up here and be stitched down. The other thing is that this, from the inside, it actually all has a top stitch. So you see there's this top stitch here, and it's top stitched from the outside. First, I'm trying to clean up all my spare threads. I'm just trying to clean up all my spare threads. And just line them up correctly. And then I stitch in the ditch, so to speak. So I'm trying to stitch right in this stitch. And I don't need to start that far away, a little bit closer. There we go, to where the belt loop is. So here we go. All right. Then I'm kind of pressing this in under here because we have a lot of bulk. And depending on your machine, you might have to figure that out. I'm actually going to slightly off center the belt loop just because there's so much bulk there, because we did have to put a seam in the center back. And so sometimes you do have to compromise little things like that in order to actually stitch them, and just trust that it's not going to be too bad. So see how it's slightly off center. We want to try and center it, but because there was so much bulk here, I didn't end up being able to center this one, and it is a little bit off center. But considering the fact that it is a belt loop and it's supposed to have a belt going through it, we're going to be okay with that. Trim out the rest of those pieces. So here I have those finished pants, and again, there was just a slight part where I felt like they were slightly crooked just because of the depth of the seam and the thickness right there. But we're going to be okay with that for this time. And of course, I was navigating around the camera, which I'm still totally getting used to, trying to figure out how to sew and move the camera around. So I hope you enjoyed this, and feel free to drop questions in the comment section. Follow me along. I'm also super active on Instagram, and you can find all of those links in the show notes below.
Thank you for watching. You can shop tutorials and classes on my website, naomifeda.net. Be sure to like and subscribe. And as always, may God sow his love into your heart today.